Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button and I'm a granite sculptor. Get ready to start doing the actual floral carving on this Tulip Bevel. And you can see off to the side I've got my clay models that I've sketched up. There was a little change where we changed the layout of the job so that instead of it being a 1.25 inch deep niche that would support the roughly 1.25 to 1.5 inch floor work and protect it, now the niche is going to be a fadeaway to nothing, so the carvings will be raised here. That will change the arrangement of the composition in terms of how the side is supported by the edge of the niche, the scotia and everything. So I'll have to change the outer two leaves just a little bit, and but have roughed this and just did a pencil sketch and did quick lines on it. This is going to be direct carved. Just going to look at it and carve it like everybody imagines a sculptor does. They just grab a piece of stone and start cutting stone away, and it turns out beautiful. It can if you do it right, and we'll give this one a shot and see how it turns out. So look forward to doing a good video of this, and it'll come and go because this is a long process and it's hard to take something that requires many hours and condense it into a video that makes sense. So we'll do some details with this, and you can refer to my other videos as well to give you some idea on how we proceed. But this will be direct carved, and we'll try to get good video of it, and hopefully have some very realistic looking tulips at the end, and just have a good video. So sit back and relax, and we'll see how it turns out. So let's get going. A few things that I should mention working on this project. It is important to, you know, they say baseball players have a routine, whether it's superstition or habit or whatever. Different people have different ways of making themselves comfortable to work. It's important with this type of work to really have a clear head. If you're not feeling good, there's things you can do that aren't critical, that won't damage the stone. That's what I talked about, certain things at certain time. You can do some axing to warm up, get everything cleaned up, tuned up. You have to have good tools, nice sharp chisels. They have to be sharp. My grinder obviously is right off to the side. You can see it just past the models. So it's only about 6 or 8 feet from where I work, and I have to sharpen my tools all the time. There's certain behaviors that you'll get used to. My sculptor always had some Altoids, and so we had an Altoid pretty regular, always take 2, and that's, to me, it's state-dependent learning is what the psychological term is about it. And so I'm very comfortable. I don't have Altoids the rest of the time, but I have them in studio because I can relax. It gives me a little something just to sort of clear my head. And I don't work with anything in my pockets because the stone will eat it up. I wear an apron on a stone like this so it doesn't destroy my clothes as quickly. And you've got to be able to come in and get into the zone. Sounds kind of tacky, but that type of thing. You want to have a nice clear head. You want to be very comfortable. You want to have all your equipment ready. You know, if your tools are almost exhausted, go ahead and dig out a couple more chisels. Have them ready so you don't have to stop when you're in the middle of the day when you're carving your best and then go dig a chisel out, or have to go make some, or order some more from the store or whatever, and you wait 2 or 3 days for them to show up, you know, from the supplier. Get your act together and be ready to work, because you need to start this and you need to finish it. You need to get it done. And that's the big pitfall of doing stone, is that this stone will look just like this in 500 years if I don't carve it right now. Or I can jump right on it and be done in a matter of, you know, a week or something, week or two. And so you have to be able to work efficiently to do this work and to earn a living. So get comfortable right now in your chair, whatever. Pay attention to every little thing I do there's a reason. And so get comfortable and learn your own parameters and what you need to do so you can do a good job when you're carving. So let's get to work. Okay, I'm working with a 1-inch hand machine and just a round chisel. One of the reasons that I wanted to demonstrate plumb blocks earlier was to provide insight into how some of this work is done. Because this is raised, I can't use a straight edge and measure a depth here as easily because I don't have, I guess I could do it from the front, but what I can do as I'm developing this, I want to make sure the ground is consistent on each side of the flowers, on the interior of the niche, of the panel, and then over here. And so as I cut this, I could place a plumb block here, one on the other side, and I can measure to make sure that my depths are the same on each side of my floral work wherever I cut them. And so that I've got a consistent depth, whether it's full depth or whether I'm spanning the entire stone, and I've got small detail here that this scotia is equivalent to the one on the partner on the opposite side. And that'll help balance out the carving so the carving looks like it's well organized and well composed, that this ground isn't shifted or tipped or twisted, and it'll look really good. But where we've got to fade, this niche on this scotia on the outside edge has got to be vertical enough to support this flower in particular, and that'll dictate how this is. So this probably won't have a mitered line cut in it. It'll probably fade with just a small transition definition line at the top. There'll have to be something because it's a square corner, but that way I can keep track of my depth and keep everything nice and balanced. Okay, done a little bit of work. Worked the ground up to the approximate edge of the bosses for the carvings. Got a small dog tag detail here in the corner. Now because this niche is faded all the way to the bottom, there's no deliberate depth. It's going to make this exposed corner a little tricky to develop because it has to justify with this, and then it has to justify with whatever scotia we put from this side, and that can't really be done until the floral is developed. And so this portion of the niche of the scotia here and here, and the same on the corresponding sides over here, it's going to have to sort of wait. We got to wait, and that's all got to be developed in harmony. So you get all this setup work done. This will push back. Because there's no depth, this dog tag will pretty much be laying right on the surface. So it'll have, you know, clear height, but it'll be set in just a little bit. You can't really set that height until this dimension is straightened out. And once again, set up a pair of plumb blocks here and here. We get everything to match, side to side, everything will be even. And that's really critical to having a job that looks like you know what you're doing versus having something that's all crooked. And it'll look like these aren't just flowers laid on to this surface. It'll look like they're part of it. And the goal is to make them look separate, even though they're one part. And so the optical way to do that, for that to demonstrate or appear that way, is to have this background completely straight. And then there's no visual noise. If you were to look at it, it'll look just like it's just a plain flat panel that somebody laid a couple of flowers and a dog tag on. So that's the goal. So it's there's a lot to develop in this. That's one reason I wanted to use this job as an example on how to do some of this work, because most people would say, can you carve some nice flowers? And they think all you have to do is carve a couple of flowers and everything else falls into place. The flowers are actually the easy part. from a technical standpoint, because you have to do all the rest of this work in order to make the flowers look good and have all this technical work around the outside and in the center, have that just disappear. So we'll keep working. Okay, I'm working this back. I've got to establish where all these details are. So I'm going to start with these two primary central leaves on the foliage, on the foliage versus starting with the flowers, because these have to agree and they move and they support the flowers to some extent. And if you carve the pretty part first, a lot of times it's just not the best way to do it. You'll focus on the pretty parts, you'll forget about the basic stuff, just like this ground and niche and everything. And then it detracts from the pretty stuff. So I'm going to do this first to get my heights and profiles set for this so they look believable. I know about how deep this stem needs to be compared to the ground, so I can go down to almost that point. I can rough this in. I'll do this leaf, I'll do the center leaf on the opposite side at the same next. And then I'll slowly work the detail around each leaf together so they come together at the same time, and then they'll be balanced. If I carve one, then I carve the other, I'm always trying to match them. One's always going to be better, one's always going to be worse. If you carve them at the same time, it's more like you're carving one element or one item, and they all balance and they work out a lot better. You're not trying to match them after you've given up material, or you've had a problem, or you had to rethink on the composition. If you do them at the same time, it's more like carving the same thing instead of carving two separate things. And it works. For me, it's a better strategy, and it produces good results. So we'll keep carving. Now when I'm working this edge back here, because there's going to be a leaf here that I've got to have supported, it's probably going to come up to about here, and I'll have to leave some material under it to support it. But if I push on this edge hard with a regular chisel, with a 9-point, or even with a 2-blade, it's going to tend to do too much, put too much energy into it, and it's going to break it off. And I don't want that. Whether it breaks it off or whether it just stuns it and fractures it so it'll break off later. So I'll use a bush chisel, spread that same head over all those edges, and it'll only take off a little bit, but it'll give me good control. It won't damage the stone. Because it's really important along now that I don't abuse things that are going to be edges or ends. If I do a lot with this stem, once I get past about this depth, if I start doing a lot of this, it's going to fracture this, and that end will just crumble and crumble and crumble. So once I get down to a certain point, I have to switch to a 2-blade to work it. And then I also have to go in and finish it with just a chisel. Very carefully work it down towards my final depth. I'll leave material around it until I start to round it and shape it to support it. That way, if there is too much energy being put into it, there's more stone to absorb it, and it's less likely to break a small piece like a small piece would break. So, and while you're doing this, your layout's going to look different in 2D than it does in 3D, because two pieces may be very close visually in 2D, but when you cut them, they may be an inch apart. And that extra distance is what makes 3D work so cool. But you have to be able to lay them out tight enough, because if you lay this out here and then go measure it with your caliper or whatever, like the people think they can do, and they say, well, it's got to be an inch away, and they put it over here, and then they carve it. Everything's all spread out, and it looks horrible. So, just more tips. This is an excellent example. Just lowering this extra material here with a 2-blade because this is tall and fragile. Hit that. That much came off. That's a big piece. If it had been the end of my stem, I wouldn't have been real happy. That's why I lower this. Well, I've got all this support, and then I work this down. I usually taper it so I can keep my lines where I want them. I don't surrender that area to have information. But this is what I was just talking about with doing edges and being careful, because this is head grain, because the grain's going straight up and down. Any push down there, that's right along the lines where it'll just break and fall right off. So we have to be very careful with all this raised work. It's going to be one of the real challenges with doing this job well, is that all this raised work could be that fragile. So the lines will go right through it. So on all the edges, we've got to be very careful. Okay, you can see, started working this foliage back. This side's still a little tall. This side over here, got it shaped fairly well. This is close to where it's going to be for height, but it's still tall. The blossoms, I started tuning them a little bit. They're still a 1/4 inch or so tall. They are expected to be about a 1/4 inch above the border originally, and right now this is they're about at 1.5 inches. There's a little bit of crown right here that needs to be pushed down, but it's really important to do all this together because you'll end up cutting this to perfect depth, and when you do that, you'll make sometimes a line like this that's a little deep, and then you got to go a little bit deeper. So it's better to have it crown just a little bit, and then I'll work that back as I develop these. This is closer to 1.25 inches, but it's still tall. And so this will come back. These will all go down a little bit, and there's still a fair amount of material to come off there. But this shows that they've got a good flow. Rework this leaf to lay down a little bit more, and we'll have another one up here to try to keep some of the flow going. And we'll match that one. This one will turn the same way. So gonna wrap this portion of the carving project up as far as the video goes. We'll move on. The next thing will show more development with the actual blossom portions. I'm going to start working this one off today. I'll push this one down a little bit more, and we'll start the next video here in just a little bit. So once again, my name's Clint Button here at Carolina Sculpture Studio, carving some tulips in Georgia blue granite on a bevel marker. Thanks for coming in.